A lion refused to leave the ranger's coffin, not for minutes, not for hours, all day long. Under the scorching sun of the African savanna, the huge animal stood over the coffin, as if guarding a fallen king. It never took its eyes off the coffin. It did not react to any threat, but it did not let anyone near. The rangers kept their weapons in their hands, but dared not touch the trigger. The crowd was silent. It was hot and the lion was still there. And no one could understand why. The rangers tried to get closer. It roared. The villagers began whispering old legends among themselves, and when someone tried to lower the coffin into the ground, the lion roared so loudly that even the bravest men backed away. But the question was not what he did, but why. What had this wild animal realized? How did it know what humans had missed? Earlier that week, a legendary wildlife ranger named Jabari Vale had disappeared. On his last mission in Mozambo National Park. After 3 decades protecting the savanna, he had been found dead after a gun battle with poachers. His body still, no pulse, and the coffin was prepared to see him off, but the lion standing over that coffin, it was as if he didn't believe the news of his death. Can a wild animal sense a sign of life that even machines can't detect? Was it just instinct, or was there a connection going back many years? The truth behind this story may shock you, but when you find out, it will change the way you see wildlife forever. Why do you think this lion was there? What did he really know? Leave it in the comments, because even you won't believe what's about to happen. As the sunrise slowly rose over Mozambo National Park, the earth-red roads glowed with the first rays of the sun. The African savanna was quiet, too quiet. The shadows of the trees lengthened and the dry grasses shivered in the gentle breeze. This morning was no ordinary morning. Today Jabari Vale was going on his last mission in the wilderness he had protected for 30 years. He was only 2 months away from retirement. But the restlessness inside him, this time was different. His wife, Amara, had appeared on the porch in the early morning. As he handed her a cup of tea, he realized his hands were shaking. They had shared this life for years. He was used to the gunfire, the threats of poachers, the jeeps disappearing in the dark. But that morning, that expression on his face, it was like a premonition piercing through him. "Be careful today," he said gently, straightening Jabari's collar. "I've heard from Nuka. This group is not like the others. Poachers, the biggest threat in Mozambo. Armed, ruthless, and now targeting not only rhinos but even lion prides. Wildlife conservation teams had been attacked repeatedly in recent months." Jabari looked as calm as ever. But he had a strange feeling. Maybe it was the dream he had had that night, a male lion looming in the darkness, trying to tell him something with his eyes. "Don't worry," Jabari said as he put his old hat on his head, an heirloom from his father. His lucky charm he had worn since his first day as a wildlife ranger. That he stopped in front of his house one last time before getting into the jeep. He looked up at the sky. The African wilderness was as vast and dangerous as ever. But this morning, there was another silence. The birds were not singing. No herds had appeared. For someone who knows the balance of nature, this was a warning. When he arrived at the park's operations center, the wildlife protection team was already assembled. Kobe, the youngest, a rookie ranger, was waiting, his hat tipped tight. His skin is sweaty, his face tense. This was his first big operation. Next to him was the legendary Jabari. If you were a spectator, would you want to be in his shoes? Tambo, the experienced tracker, was silent as he scanned the surroundings out of the corner of his eye. The marks of ritual were etched into his face. Nothing escaped his eyes, neither man nor beast. The language of the wild was like a map for him. McKenna, the sniper, was checking her weapon. She came from a military background and had been fighting armed poachers for years. His calm was almost eerie. Zola and Demba were preparing the devices. And at the head of it all was Adebayo, Jabari's assistant. He had a burn scar on his neck from rescuing 3 injured animals from a burning rehabilitation center years ago. Adebayo opened the map. His finger pointed to the intersection of 3 different prides of lions. Poachers are heading northeast. They are reported to be heavily armed. Their first target is probably rhinos, but be careful. Lions are also in danger. The plan was clear. 3 teams would be dispersed in 3 different directions. Jabari would take the main trail with rookie Kobe, and the feeling inside him still hadn't gone away that he'd done many missions over the years, but today he shuddered. Perhaps these were the silent steps of an approaching end. Maybe nature was saying something in its own language again, but people still didn't know how to listen. "We don't intend to kill," Jabari said before they set off. "But if they attack, we will do what is necessary. Protect lives first. Wild animals are our duty. But human life is also our responsibility." The 3 jeeps started their engines. Clouds of red dust mingled in the sky, and the savannah swallowed them silently, but something was waiting, and no one knew yet that at the end of this journey, a lion would stand over the coffin. As the sky opened like a crimson curtain, the 3 vehicles disappeared in the dust, heading deeper into the savannah. Jabari and Kobe followed the central route and entered the thorny acacia trees. It was quiet. Mozambo National Park was eerily quiet this morning. Normally at this time of day, herds of zebra would be visible in the distance and wildebeest would be scouting the area. But today, there was no movement. Kobe had sweat on his hands. The young wildlife ranger kept going back and forth to the gun at his waist. His eyes darted from side to side, flinching at the slightest crackle. "Breathe deeply," Jabari said slowly. "If nature is silent here, something is either hidden or feared." These words hung in the air. Because a few meters ahead, the bushes on the ground were trampled. Footprints, but not ordinary. Military boot prints. Kobe bent down, pressed his fingers. Fresh. They passed no more than half an hour ago. Jabari looked up. The sun was high. There were no shadows. When she turned her head to the right, something caught her eye. A metallic reflection. "Get down." A bullet sliced through the air. Then another. Gunshots tore through the silence of the savannah. Kobe screamed. He had been shot in the shoulder. Blood instantly stained his shirt red. Jabari pulled him, taking cover behind a tree. His heart pounded against his chest. "We're here," he yelled into the radio. "We're ambushed on the North Road. Kobe is wounded. Poachers fleeing west." The fighting started. Dust, sweat, gunpowder, everything mixed together. 2 men were moving in front of us. One was tall, dressed in camouflage, carrying an AK-47. The other was shorter, with a rifle with a scope and a clear aim. The wildlife protection team immediately changed direction. Adebayo shouted over the radio, "Hold on. We're coming." After a brief but brutal firefight, McKenna's sharp shot hit one of them in the leg. The other threw down his weapon and surrendered. But the other 3 poachers were still around. They had disappeared somewhere in the bushes. Jabari grabbed Kobe's shoulder. He tore off a piece of his shirt and made a tourniquet. The blood mixed with sweat burned his hands. But he couldn't stop. He was on high alert, because something was still moving. Shadows were moving in the savannah, and then, a movement to the left. Agile, like a shadow, but it wasn't human. Jabari turned, raised his gun. But he was too late. A sound like an explosion echoed. The bullet pierced his chest. It was like a hammer had gone through him. He gasped for air. His knees went weak, his eyes went black. But with a last reflex, he raised his gun and fired. A scream. A body fell to the ground, but Jabari collapsed too. Only the sky remained behind him, a boundless, pure blue void. In the distance, the roar of a male lion echoed. But perhaps it was only the last echo of his mind. Adebayo's voice came over the radio, blurred. "Jabari. Hang on. The helicopter is on its way." But Jabari no longer heard the voice, but silenced. As his eyes closed, there was only one image in his mind's eye: lion cub with light in its eyes, and then everything went black. The hospital emergency room was quiet but tense. When Jabari's supposedly lifeless body was opened for rechecking, there were only 3 people inside: his son Bakery, the elderly Dr. Mumba, and a nurse. The whole body was cold. Lips were purple, eyelids dull. But Bakery did not give up. Try another method, he said. I feel he's still there. With his experienced hands, Dr. Mumba pressed Jabari's neck, wrist and behind the ear, one by one. And at that moment, there was a tremor. It was so slight that it could have escaped a machine. But for an experienced doctor, it was enough. There's a pulse, he whispered. Weak, but real. The blood pressure machine was hooked up, and 4 started. The nurses moved quickly. When the heart monitor was reconnected, a thin line moved across the screen. Jabari was alive. But it was a condition that was difficult to explain medically. He was diagnosed with lethargy, or suspended animation. The heart had slowed down so much that it was initially thought to have stopped completely. At that time, there was still someone waiting in the hospital garden, Aslan. That he was lying on the concrete in front of the door. He didn't take his eyes off the building, didn't look at anyone passing by. He was just waiting. Is it possible? Bakery said, looking at his mother and the doctors. How can an animal feel that she is still alive? Amara could not answer. But the tears in her eyes told him she knew something. When Jabari opened his eyes the next morning, his first words were a confused whisper. A lion, was it a lion, that protected me? Bakery nodded. And he wouldn't let him go down to the grave until he saw you. Jabari was silent. But a memory rose from the depths of his mind. Years ago, a little lion cub whose mother had been killed, a deep wound on his left front paw, and Jabari had healed him, breaking the rules. For months he had secretly fed it, raised it, and then released it back into the wild. His eyes were the same, he said hoarsely. It was that cub.it remembered me. And in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again, because this was no longer just a story of redemption, but a silent cry of unforgettable loyalty. A month later, Jabari Vale sat leaning on his cane on his porch on the edge of Mozambo National Park. His eyes were still tired, but the life in him had been rekindled. Looking back, he remembered not only the bullets, but also the silence at the edge of death. And in that silence, a wild animal waited. Newspapers talked about it for days. Wildlife ranger, back from the dead, thanks to a lion. Lion guarded the coffin. Did he really feel it? Is there loyalty in nature? Scientists are looking for answers. But the headlines didn't matter to Jabari. All that mattered to him was that he was looking out from the porch that morning and saw a silhouette on the horizon again. That male lion appeared at the edge of the savannah with slow steps. His mane fluttered in the wind, his amber eyes staring directly at Jabari. Jabari stood up, leaned on his walking stick, smiled. You've come again, huh? The lion paused for a few seconds. Then he bowed his head slightly, and then he turned around. This time he didn't even look again. That moment Jabari understood everything. This was not goodbye. It meant, you are safe now. The lion cub he had given life to so many years ago had now given his life back. Nature does not forget time, and sometimes, when least expected, and in the most unexpected way, it would pay back. Jabari thought long and hard that night. Man always sees nature as something to be protected. But maybe sometimes nature protects us too. Do you think, do animals really remember? Is loyalty unique to humans? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. What do you think about this incredible story? And remember, sometimes, a wild animal can remember much more than a human.